Welcome everybody. Good to see you all virtually. Thank you for joining. So I think we can go to apologies then. I wonder whether Sarah, could you just let us know what apologies we've got today?
Yes, certainly. Jason Stokes, Deborah Zeppelin, Mark Burgess, Patricia Dorsey. We do have Karen Watts deputising, and James Reader.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so declarations of interests. I don't think there are any declarations relating to any specific items today. The list there is always there for people to have a look at. So I think we're all right on that. So that takes us to the minutes from our last meeting, which was back in October. So thank you for these minutes, Sarah. They're really good minutes. It's really hard to capture everything, but thank you very much. So let's just go through, if I just go through page by page for sort of accuracy and review. So page 2, page 3, and we've got page 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So people are happy that that's an accurate reflection of our discussion last time. Okay, a few nods, so I'll take that as a yes. So thank you very much. Okay, so that takes us to the forward planner. So I wonder whether, Sadie, are you going to take us through this?
Yes. Would you like me to just cover the action log?
Oh, I missed the action. Yes, I've missed the action log. Thank you. Yes, please do that.
So the first one is done, which is the minutes. The second one related to the discussion we had on workforce and training at the last meeting and the different roles working in general practice. I have linked in with our comms lead on this. She has said that all of the practices in Norfolk and Waveney have been provided with a campaign toolkit, which includes assets about the different roles for their digital screens and for their own social media. She's also created a newsletter template they can use to introduce the different roles to their patients, and we've done a few reminders about it. We've also done some direct promotion through paid for social media about the different roles and a few press ads that ran earlier in the summer. So I think in terms of what's been provided to practices, I think that's probably good, but what we don't have a good feel for is, are they all using it, and what feedback they've got. So we will try and work out what to do next. But I think in terms of the campaign itself, there's plenty going on. Of course, we can always do more. And I think the specific discussion last time was whether very local councils like parish councils could be enlisted to help. And so I have to say we haven't managed to progress that in between meetings, but it's still something that we're considering as part of our engagement plans, probably next year now, rather than this year.
And just to recap, really, the context for this was recognising that there were many different roles within primary care, and actually, the more that we could do to encourage people to see the right person, not necessarily always a GP, but the person who was most appropriate in the practice. And we felt that perhaps we needed to communicate better what those different roles are, what their skills were, to encourage people to use that. Really, that was the context.
That's right.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess this isn't going to happen overnight, is it? This is a long-term sort of, I guess, program of sort of, you know, education, information, change, etc. Okay. All right, that's good. So maybe, you know, building in other ways of communicating that, and as I said, parish councils, I think, would be a really good place.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so that does take us to the forward plan.
Yes, so as you can see, we're continuing to work on the forward plan. We've now removed the 2 meetings that we agreed to cancel, and greyed out the areas which have been transferred out of this particular committee and into other areas. So we will continue to refine the work, and next time we meet in February, we will bring a draft plan for the next financial year as well for consideration. But unless there are any questions, I wasn't proposing to say any more about the forward plan.
Yep, I think that's any hands, so I think that's fine. Lovely, thank you. Okay, so that takes us to the risk register.
You happy for me to come
Yes,
in,
please.
Debbie?
Yes, sorry, I'm struggling to find it. Go on, I've got it.
Okay, so for the risk register today, you'll see that we have had no changes in scoring this time on the summary sheet. You'll also see a suggestion and a proposal on the summary sheet about how we manage risks going forward, given that we now have the operational delivery groups as well as this committee. So we have 2 critical risks on our board assurance framework, which are the resilience of general practice and the resilience of dental services in Norfolk and Waveney. And what we're proposing is that both of those risks continue to be brought to committee for monitoring, but that the other risks are managed in the appropriate operational delivery group. Obviously, if they reach a point where they need to be escalated or for whatever reason, then we would propose to bring them into committee for discussion. But committee will still monitor most of those areas through the reports that you will be receiving. So that was being proposed for approval. And then if I just go on to the two critical risks, if I can scroll through and get to them, you'll see that the resilience of general practice is highlighted there in red, the update. We have just been able to identify and release some funding to support additional capacity within general practice, and we've had a good response to that so far. That's pleasing to see. Today I've just been informed that there has been approval for some more funding. We're just waiting for further detail on that so that we can then link in with the local medical committee about how we go out to practices on that. Unfortunately, we've had 2 further practices who have been identified as being at risk, and those will be highlighted in the private session in more detail in the operational delivery group. And we've had some changes within our team as well. So you might see Ollie Lovelace in the background. Oh, there he is on camera, who has replaced Sarah Harvey in our team on a very short-term secondment. So that we're very pleased to have Ollie, but it will impact on our capacity a little bit as Ollie gets up to speed. And we continue to have some capacity issues in the interface area, but we hope that with our organisational change programme that will be rectified in due course. On the dental risk. Hopefully members will have had a chance to look at the update. I've just got to scroll all the way through. Bear with me, apologies. You will see that the projects that were highlighted in the short-term dental plan have now gone live, and largely we're really very pleased with how those are progressing. The workforce initiatives that were agreed last time have also gone live, and again, you know, it's very pleasing to see the response to those, although we have to be realistic about how much will happen in the very short term on that. And then we've just also highlighted that UDA stands for Units of Dental Activity, which is how contracts are funded in dentistry. And we do have a review underway on that at the moment. So again, that's positive and seeks to address some of the feedback that we've been having from our dental colleagues. So I wasn't proposing to say any more on that, Debbie, but very happy to answer questions along with my colleagues around the screen.
Okay, brilliant. All right. So I think I saw Hillary's hand go up. Hillary.
Hi, yeah, thank you. So it wasn't really a question, it was more a comment really. So as Sadie said, there has been some additional funding offered to primary care for resilience over winter. And while that's very welcome, for a 10,000 patient practice list, it would equate to about 4 days of a GP in total, not 4 days a week, 4 days over the whole winter. So I think we just have to be realistic that it's not very much. It's a bit of a drop in the ocean given demand, and if there is any additional funding coming through, I'm sure that'd be very welcome.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Hillary. Hein.
Thanks, Debbie. So on the proposal for presentation of risks to the committee, I'm happy with the proposal so that we highlight the critical risks in more detail. It would still be good to show that sort of first page summary dashboard as a kind of overview. And my other comment was about the dental service resilience risk. It indicates on the detailed sheet we're aiming for a score of 6 within 12 months, and I like to be optimistic, but that seems a tad too optimistic. So maybe Sadie, you with the team can look at what is a probably more realistic forecast. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Hein.
Yeah, okay. I mean, just to reassure others that this gets airtime at the ICB, so you know there's the opportunity in reporting the sort of the key things from this committee. It is regularly the resilience both of dental services and primary care services that is fed into there. So you know, it's high on the agenda. Okay, so with those, are we content to agree with Hein's suggestion about just looking at that dental risk and the prospect score? Are we happy to agree the recommendation? So we continue to look regularly at those 2 high risk ones, but the others come less frequently, but we still see the overall picture. Yep. Excellent. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. So that moves us on to, so moving into service development then. So we're looking at optometry update. Who's picking this one up, Sadie? Is this you again? Or?
This is Catherine, Debbie.
Excellent. Okay. Over to you, Catherine.
Okay, thank you. So I will assume this paper has been read and I will just pick out some key points it contains. So if we start with contracts, there are 2 types of GOS or general ophthalmic services contracts, and these are mandatory and additional. So we have 92 GOS optometry contractors holding a total of 105 contracts. And to give you an idea of the numbers we looked at the activity in 2022, 2023. where a total of 300,817 GOS site tests took place in Norfolk and Waveney. We know 2.68% of these were domiciliary visits, and just over 6% resulted in onward referrals to GP practices or hospital ophthalmic services. And we are aware that these referrals are not always electronic. Alongside GOS contracts, there are also 4 local enhanced services which can be commissioned by the ICB. So these are the Community Urgent Eye Care Service, Post-Operative Cataract Assessments, Glaucoma Referral Refinement, and also management of untreated glaucoma suspects and ocular hypertension. The ICB meets with the local optometric committee monthly. In terms of optometry workforce, we know there are approximately 120 optometrists working in Norfolk and Waveney. However, it is known that there is a heavy reliance on locums. A training needs analysis survey has been sent out, which will help to identify any training needs and enable the ICB to create a training package. NHS England has also recently announced that ICBs will be asked to introduce site tests in special educational needs schools from April 2024. The recent contract variations to the GOS contracts relate to patients with no fixed abode who can now use alternative addresses, mandatory electronic claims from the 1st of January 2024, and this will allow us to obtain more accurate data. The other contract variations are reduction in claim window, death of a contractor, and removing the requirement to collect data on contract applicant sex. So in summary, we are starting to understand the challenges, and we aim to put in place local solutions to build resilience and stability across primary care optometry.
Great, thank you, Catherine. I was really interested in this report because it's not an area that I know a lot about, and I guess if I can kick off while others are thinking, what I couldn't tell is whether the sort of the number of tests, the balance of how they break down, the community visits, whether we had any comparators to know whether that felt right given our population. I guess particularly given the rural nature of our population and people who are housebound or for whatever reason, whether that 2% figure was, whether we thought that was okay.
I think that's a really interesting point, and we do have access to a lot of data, and we would also be able to make comparisons to other ICBs. So that's something we're just really beginning within optometry, but that's certainly something that we can look more in depth about, and looking at health inequalities and how does that work for our specific region.
Karen.
Hi, thanks so much, Catherine. It's a really good paper. Just building on from Debbie's comment, I'm particularly interested in those within residential care because it's absolutely tragic. And if people are at risk of falls and, they haven't had some sort of supportive to be able to access a site test, do we know whether that's happening in the proportions? Because we have quite an elderly demographic, don't we? So to me, it's really important that we prevent things like mechanical falls, because we know that can often be the sequelae to the last year or two of somebody's life at a certain age. So really keen to make sure we're optimising that. Thank you.
Did you want to come back on that one, Catherine?
Yeah, I think this is a really good point. We know that site tests are very important to prevent falls. So it would be really interesting for us to understand whether the domiciliary services that we have available in Norfolk and Waveney are really enough for our elderly rural population, and if it actually meets the needs. And that would be a piece of work we'd be keen to pick up and look at carefully.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Andrew.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Catherine. I just wanted to know, from the point of view of the patients, I'm not sure that many people would be aware that some community, I was about to say community pharmacists, community opticians carry out an emergency service. Have you any idea of what proportion offer that service?
I don't have any figures to hand on that. I know they're signposted from general practice, but I could potentially look at getting some more data about that.
Speaking personally, I mean, I go and have my glasses looked at every year, like a lot of us do, and I'm certainly not being made aware of that. No signposting, no adverts, and it would be very, very good for people with foreign bodies in the eye, for example.
Yeah.
And you see the kit that an optician has in terms of slit lamps and all the rest of it compared to what we have as GPs. It's 1,000 times more. And it's always puzzled me that resource has not been used, but I'm sure it's to do with finances as ever.
That's really good, useful point, and it might be useful to pick up how we actually make people aware of that service in Norfolk and Waveney.
Yeah, great, thanks.
I mean, I guess this is one of the the potential benefits of the local devolution of these services to ICB level, that we know our population, the knowledge that Karen brings to this in terms of sort of care homes, etc. It allows us then to begin to influence and shape these services so that they do meet the needs of our population. I think it's really encouraging. Sadie.
I was just thinking of some figures off the top of my head. So we've got a population of 1.1 million. I'm just going to look at Catherine as I make this statement to check that I'm correct. I think it's recommended that people have a sight test every 2 years, routinely.
Generally, unless there's certain people, for example,
groups
certain groups more often, but generally every 2 years.
Yes. So 300,000 a year, it's less than a third of our population, isn't it? And if everybody was having theirs done, you'd expect at least 600,000 tests.
Yeah,
I could probably see the impact that would have financially, of course. But I was also just thinking about Karen's point. I think we've got about 11,000 care home beds in Norfolk and Waveney, and that's excluding people who are housebound as well. So again, the 2,000 8,000 tests that were done by domiciliary providers seems again like a very small proportion of our population. So I think these are really excellent points that we do need to take away and have a look at. And it's perfect timing as well, because we're in the middle of starting to develop our strategic approach for primary care, and we'll be bringing that back at the end of the financial year. And certainly for optometry, we can consider how we incorporate these points into that document.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Sadie. Catherine, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to make it really clear that, of course, not everybody's entitled to NHS sight tests, so we can't just use those figures to look at how many of our population, there's only certain sectors of the population, children over 60s, and then certain exempt groups within that age range in between, but the majority of sight tests may well be private. So that's just worth noting.
Yeah. Okay. I think it would be great to sort of, maybe look at some comparative figures, identify, I think that would be really good. Thank you. Hilary.
Yeah, I was going to make a similar point. We see lots of patients who've not had a sight test in many years, and I think the cost is a disincentive. I took a family member at the weekend for one, and I think it was £48.50. So for some people, that is a really significant cost that would put them off, I think.
Yeah. And as we've been talking here, I mean, I don't know whether, people sort of go to have a sight test to get their glasses sort of updated, rather than thinking of this as a preventative self-care sort of, opportunity for people. The link with falls is really significant. I mean, we've been doing some outreach, some proactive calls to people that we've identified at risk of falling. I'm just thinking, actually, maybe we ought to, have a conversation with yourselves about whether we should include as an option to help people. Actually, can we connect you to a sight test? that might be a really positive thing to do. Catherine, come back in again.
Yeah, I think that would be a really useful thing, because what we do know is that people who fall, they're often in the wrong glasses. So maybe previously that have been in varifocals, but of their, you know, general health changes and mobility changes, it's actually really vital that the glasses they're wearing are suitable for that person there and then. So, for example, if you're minimising falls, it's very sensible to take people out of varifocals. And, for example, going back to 2 separate pairs, which, although it's less convenient, you're looking at minimising a fall as the greater good there. I am an optometrist by background, but certainly we know that the falls issue there is really, you know, very much related. And often you will see elderly people at risk of falls in completely the wrong prescription, where the varifocal part will stop them seeing the very thing that they try not to trip over. So it's definitely ties in very well with falls prevention.
Okay, that's really interesting. Peter.
Yeah, I guess that sparks a consideration on the sort of other side of prevention here. So there's something around one of the exempted groups, for example, of obviously diabetics. So there's a whole host of numbers we could probably gather and collectively use as a proxy number to get an idea of what proportion eligible for a free test are getting their free test in any 2-year cycle or whatever. But on the other side, are the providers of falls services, responses to falls, the people who are coming in contact with someone who's had a fall, are they aware and are they checking and raising? Have they got the right glasses? When did you last have an eye test? Did you have a conversation with your optician when you did have an eye test that you're increasingly unstable or whatever? And just, you know, looking out into the system to take those opportunities to flag to people that actually the glasses they wear might be an intrinsic part of why they're falling. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, Karen.
Thanks so much. Absolutely agree, Peter. I guess for me, the person to talk to, Catherine, I'm very happy to plug in with you, is Paul Benson, because he leads on the system-wide falls work. But one of the other benefits of having your eyes tested, thinking about what Debbie said around the preventative, is that often people don't realise they've got glaucoma and they've lost their peripheral vision, haven't they? So it's really important from an eye health. I think maybe we're not promoting enough in terms of the eye health, or that actually you started to develop cataracts, etc., as you get older. Thank you.
Okay, Catherine, sum up for us.
Just to say that I really agree with Karen. As an optometrist myself, you'll tend to pick up people that maybe haven't been to general practice for many years. They'll turn up in an optician's because they suddenly notice they can't see so well. But on questioning or when checking the health of the eyes, you may pick up things such as suspected high blood pressure, cholesterol, you know, even undiagnosed diabetes, which shouldn't ever be picked up in an eye examination, but certainly is being much more recently since COVID than you would have seen maybe, you know, years before. So it's the preventative aspect, isn't it, that maybe needs to be encouraged, to be greater awareness.
Okay, that's really good. I mean, you can see, Catherine, what you know, interest and you know, discussion this has sparked. So thank you very much. It's really good. And clearly, you know, this is the start, not the answer. And actually, to go away and do some more work, and as Sadie says, bring that back at the right time. I think that would be great. So thank you very much. Okay, so that takes us on to complaints and contacts. So did I see John here?
You did see John here.
Hello,
yeah,
John. Over to you.
Thank you. Yes, and thanks for inviting me along. For those in the room who don't know me, I'm John Punt. I'm the Complaints and Inquiries Manager for the Integrated Care Board. And the report that I'm here to talk about just reflects the total amount of contacts that we as an ICB have received during quarters 1 and 2, and just really having a look at what that's telling us. However, it's probably worth just caveating that with the fact that although this is 6 months worth of data, and as everyone will know, the ICB took on the delegation or the pod delegation kind of in April. The full delegation of primary care complaints, concerns, inquiries didn't actually fully occur until the 1st of July 2023. So essentially what we're looking at here is 3 months worth of meaningful data as to, you know, kind of what primary care contacts are telling us. The previous 3 months to that, it was kind of operating in shadow form. We had a few of the formal complaints. We had some oversight of that, which Sadie will attest to because she had many of those in her inbox. It wasn't really until the 1st of July that we started to get the full picture. So, you know, that is reflected in the report, and you can see there from the graphs that I've represented that there is a dramatic and exponential increase in July of that. What I've tried to do is to break that down into discipline, so it's quite clear that, you know, there's a lot of contacts about dentistry, there's a lot of contacts about general practice, and the two of those not necessarily wholly focus on access, but they do focus on access, and you know, I don't think that's anything that would surprise us as commissioner at the moment. You know, it is that people are raising, certainly with regards to dentistry, that they're struggling to get access, full stop, and that people with regards to general practices, they are having difficulties either in getting through to their GP practice, or perhaps they're not completely au fait with, you know, the online systems that they might have, or what times of the day they open, or, you know, kind of issues around staffing capacity and all of those things which are already known. And I know Sadie and the team have done a lot of hard work with regards to the access plan. So I don't think necessarily that this report is telling us anything that we didn't know already, but it is useful to know, or it's useful to reflect that it is definitely, you know, kind of suggesting that what we thought is true. It's also worth highlighting that there are a couple of appendices to the report which are probably going to be useful for some of our teams who work with providers, which, although they're not big numbers, are reflective of the specific numbers that we've received per provider or per practice, whatever that might be. You know, kind of, so it just gives a helpful hint as to where there might have been, you know, kind of an influx of inquiries or complaints, and actually then do we need to offer support to providers, or is that suggestive of something that is going on in that particular locality? So yeah, I mean, I've kind of taken the report as read. Really happy to talk about any more detail in it, or take any questions, or if there's anything else that the committee would like to see in future reports. Yeah, I'm all ears.
All right, thanks, John. I think it was helpful to sort of explain, you know, that sort of transition phase, because you know, clearly what you're telling us is that we shouldn't think that there were hardly any complaints and then suddenly there's masses. Actually,
Yes.
It's more to do with a good capture now and a sound baseline that we've got to work from. So that's helpful. Okay, any comments or questions or reflections for John? Hein.
Yeah, thanks, John. I really liked reading the report. I think it was captured well, both some charts and the themes. So that format certainly works for me. And you've asked how regularly you want to see it. I will leave it up to you, Debbie, but twice a year would sort of seem right to me, that we sort of keep a feel of what's going on. My question was really, what feedback do you receive from people who have complained or contacted you? Do they generally feel they've been listened to and issues addressed, or because you may not always have an answer they really want to hear, so to speak? So just curious at that aspect, John.
It's an excellent question. I mean, certainly if someone is unhappy with the response that they've received, then you know, we will hear about it. And I think what the complaints team tries to do in the first instance is, if someone is dissatisfied with their response, we will look to see if there are any other ways in which we can help try and resolve the issues. So that might be, you know, a face-to-face or virtual meeting to discuss, you know, their concerns further, or, you know, it may be that a further response or further investigation is required. We don't, I think it's a good point, we don't actually do any proactive surveys around, you know, kind of people's satisfaction with the complaints process. And the reason that we decided not to do that previously was because, although surveys that I've run in the past have really tried to drill down as to whether people were happy with the investigation and the process, actually what tends to happen is if someone's unhappy with the outcome, then it tends to muddy the feedback that you receive. So it's a really difficult thing to get right, I think. but
Yeah.
but it's a useful prompt to have a think about, actually, could we do it better? And is there, and it's something I can take away, because I attend a number of forums with colleagues kind of regionally and locally who are complaints managers. I might just take that to them and ask if there's anything else they do which we could perhaps replicate or adopt to get that kind of feedback.
Okay, thanks, John.
Thank you.
Karen.
Thanks, Debbie. John, it's a really good report. It's really good to see. And I know how busy it's been with dentistry and a number of other things coming on board, because quite often it will come into my team too. And it's good that we work together to get the best outcome. I guess for me, it's about the so what question. So what has changed as a consequence? So if people are theming and saying, we're not happy, it'd be really good to be able to demonstrate, what we've done or how we've acted. And I'm just thinking of, and forgive me if it is in the paper, I did read it this morning. So, for example, when we look at people with access of dental services, it'd be really nice to be able to measure that in the paper about the work Sadie and her team have done to open up, 10,000, however. Is it hours, minutes? We've opened it. I'd love to say hours. I was being over optimistic there. Don't record that. It's minutes of service we've expanded into, because I don't think we're very good at always showing that. Yeah, this is what we've done so far.
But I think you're absolutely right, Karen. I think it's a challenge that has also, because I report into the Patient and Communities Committee as well. It's a challenge that has been levelled at not necessarily my team, but the organisation about, right, so we're getting this feedback and so what? I guess the response to that is that this isn't me betraying any confidence, is that but when the ICB finalises its restructure, the remit of the team that I currently manage is going to shift somewhat and become more of a patient experience team. Now, what that should hopefully look at, and this is quite aspirational, I think, right now, so there's quite a long journey to go on, but it's not necessarily about just looking at complaints, concerns, inquiries from members of Parliament. It's actually trying to marry that up with the things that not only your team are hearing, Karen, kind of in terms of serious incidents or provider to provider feedback, or whatever that may look like, but also what is being told to the providers as well, and then trying to bring some kind of systems leadership around the so what and give that some teeth. That isn't fully fleshed out yet, but in terms of the point that you're making, I think it's definitely something that's on the radar.
Okay, that's good. Oliver.
Thank you. Yeah, I've worked with John quite a bit in my previous role, and I just thought it'd be interesting, like you said, about the report the next time it's kind of due. And I wonder if what you said in regards to access and the capacity and access plans that the PCNs have been working really hard on with Sadie's team. It's just interesting to see maybe in 6 months to a year, because they've obviously got milestones within those plans, to see if there's any correlation to the complaints that are coming through, and just to see if there'd be any kind of improvements against those kind of the complaints that are coming in against those milestones. I thought that might be something interesting that we could have a look at in the future.
I think it would be really interesting to track numbers, because this is just anecdotally and the way it feels, but it certainly feels like access to GP practices, the amount of concerns that we receive about that area over maybe the last kind of 2-3 months or a couple of months, so that doesn't include the reporting period, might have just dropped off a little bit. So I've and that may be as a result of work that is already going on in PCNs. And so yeah, no, I think it's certainly a topic that I think will continue to be important to people and will get contacted about, but actually the numbers will be very interesting to track. I think you're quite right.
Okay. Shepherd.
Just to say thank you, John. Your work connects quite well with the capacity and improvement work we are doing, and we will use it to actually some form of baseline to track that improvement. So thank you for that. What would I would probably connect with yourself to really try and drill where this is coming from, to see whether it's actually connecting to other pieces of work or support or improvements that we are working with practices, because this is really good. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's actually that's a really good point in terms of what we do with the data, behind the report, because I know I've had requests from, well, Shepherd, people in your team. I've had requests from people in primary care networks, and I've had requests from people in Karen's team as well. And I know that I think it's Lisa in Karen's team is quite happy to join all of that up, and try and become a bit more of a unified force in terms of what the data is telling us. So yeah, that'd be really good. And again, anything that you're after around specific lines of work, give us a shout. We're really up for ad hoc requests.
Oh, a man after my own heart. Thank you.
Well, it depends on how busy it gets, but
It's okay.
right now, yeah.
Right. Karen.
I'm just laughing because I know how busy John is and team. So I guess for us, it's exactly what Shepherd is saying. It's about the triangulation of information, isn't it? This is just one lens. It's looking at F5, it's looking at complements, because we mustn't forget those, because we get lots of things right, and we always focus on things we don't do as well. And it's really that overall thing, isn't it? Sort of looking at the CQC, because this is how we get to understand a position within a particular area, isn't it? So complaints are absolutely pivotal. So thank you, John, and to your team.
Great. Okay, thank you. So I think you've brought 1 and 2 here. So I think probably 3 and 4 would be a good sort of next phase to bring, allows enough volume to be able to identify trends, track them, compare. That would be, I think that would be good.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
See
Well,
you
thank you
in 6
very
months
much.
then.
Yep. Really helpful. You're welcome to stay if you want, but I'm sure you've got plenty to do.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Excellent. All right. So that takes us to pharmacy first. And this is, who am I coming to?
That's myself, Debbie. I'm Sharon. I'm the community.
Excellent.
Don't know me.
Okay, welcome, Sharon. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for inviting me to talk about the Pharmacy First service. This is for noting for the committee. Obviously, I'll deem the report as being read, but I just wanted to highlight some key points to the committee for discussion. So back in May 23, the delivery plan for recovering access to primary care cited an additional investment into community pharmacy clinical services. Following negotiations between NHS England and the Department of Health and Community Pharmacy England, who is the pharmacy contractors negotiations, in November 23, the launch of the Pharmacy First service was announced, with also expansions to the oral contraception and hypertension services, and the Pharmacy First service will launch officially from the end of January. Pharmacy First is a brand new advanced service which will have 3 elements within it. The first is the brand new element, which is the Pharmacy First clinical pathways, and I'll pick up on that in a minute. The second 2 elements already form part of the community pharmacy consultation service, also known as CPCS, so they will remain, but they will remain under a Pharmacy First title. So we'll have Pharmacy First urgent supply and also Pharmacy First minor ailments. The clinical pathways elements of the Pharmacy First service is going to enable pharmacists to offer advice to patients and supply NHS medicines, some of them potentially prescription-only medicines, through the use of PGDs. The 7 common conditions that this will be applicable to will be sinusitis, sore throat, earache, infected insect bite, impetigo, shingles, and also uncomplicated UTIs in women only. Consultations will be taken through referrals, so general practice will be able to refer into pharmacy, but there'll also be an encouragement for patients to present at the pharmacy without a referral. This is not particularly dissimilar to what some patients' current thought process is now. Pharmacists are going to require significant clinical upskilling, particularly in the field of ear, nose and throat identification and management, and it has to be noted that not all pharmacies will be ready to go live on the NHS recommended date, and we must also remember this is an advanced service and it doesn't form part of the essential contract. So some contractors may decide that they're not in a position to invest into this service currently at this moment in time. The ICP are supporting the upskilling of our pharmacists by providing an additional 150 spaces for clinical otoscope training, and that's been commissioned through the CPPE. An initial setup fee for the pharmacies of £2,000 will be paid by NHS England, and they have to sign up by the end of January. However, that money will be clawed back if the pharmacy hasn't provided any services by the end of March. The service fee for the service is £15, and also there'll be a fixed monthly payment of £1,000, and that will be applied to people that meet a minimum number of clinical pathway consultations. That will increase gradually over time, and eventually by October 24 there'll be an expectations of 30 consultations being completed to receive that £1,000 spot fee. As this is a new service and a new commissioned evaluation, NHS England, have commissioned evaluation of this service, and there will be heavy scrutiny from the antimicrobial resistance point of view also. Also, the digital infrastructure to support this is being developed by NHS England. Our systems between general practice and pharmacies will need to talk to each other in more complex ways than ever before. It has to be noticed the service will not go live unless these IT structures are in place. As an ICB, we're going to play a key role into the success of this service. So engagement has already started to happen with both the LPC and LMC representatives. A communication plan for January has been finalised, and this will include visibility of the service from myself at as many PCN practice manager meetings as possible. At the moment, there's still a lot of questions without answers, but one of the key communication objectives will be for local stakeholders to talk to each other to understand their plan for delivery and how they're going to work together for the benefit of the patient. Local patient communication will also be needed to manage the patient expectation around this, and again this plan is being worked through with our key stakeholders. To finalise, this announcement is welcomed by the ICB. However, we will need to work with our stakeholders to ensure the service is as a positive experience for our patients as it can be. There is a possibility of a large support of capacity release from primary care, but we also need to understand and accept that there is also capacity issues within some pharmacies, and this will need to be worked through as the service launches. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sharon. There's a lot in this, isn't there? I mean, it is potentially quite a significant shift. Hilary.
So again, really more a comment than a question. So I think while some of it is very welcome, I think the amount of work it's created in primary care already is quite significant. So patient goes into a pharmacy, has a blood pressure check which is raised, and that's communicated through to the practice. And then a whole host of things has to happen, which requires quite a lot of work. So although the upfront bit is simple and straightforward, that all the bits that follow after that are quite a number of visits to the practices, ECGs, blood tests, doctor involvement, etc., and that hasn't really been factored into the proposal. So whilst we understand it's a national thing and we don't have a lot of choice, and identifying these people is obviously great in the long run, I think there is a bit of an opportunity cost at the moment in that capacity is being diverted away from things it would have been used for before in order to manage many more communications about blood pressure which are coming in every day. So just a caution that goes with it.
Yeah, but the work it generates and the need for you as GPs and practices to be able then to respond to this is not insignificant, I guess. Yeah, okay. It feels, I don't know whether, oh no, you come in first, Shepherd, go.
I just wanted to echo Hilary's point on that, drawing a parallel on the work we've done with LD annual health checks. So we went on a campaign and did lots of health promotion there. And that created a lot of demand in general practice that they struggled to cope with. So we really need to think about what we are doing and how it impacts the next layer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shepherd. Peter.
Yeah, just a couple of quick points, and I want to acknowledge Sharon and I have already met and talked about the programme on the contraception side. Sorry, I should be clear on the contraception side. It's more just a general point, Sharon. It would be really helpful to just keep plugged in on where the numbers are going and that type of thing, and also just have a think about, and I can raise it with the LPC directly. I meet with them each month myself about the sort of overall pathway. It's great that we'll have widened access, but ultimately the oral contraceptive has about a 10% failure rate in real world use, and the optimal is still long acting and reversible. We do have high LARC rates, but we also happen to also have Lark-Orval contraception rates, and it's the bit in the middle that we do very little of. So it would just be helpful, as I say, if we can keep plugged in and just have a think about, you know, as it builds up, where our numbers are going at a system level. Thanks very much.
Yeah, because I think I know we've spoken mainly about the pharmacy first service, but obviously there is expansion of the blood pressure and the oral contraception services. So Peter, we're quite tied in with the oral contraception because that's our model for the independent prescriber pathfinder program as well, and we're linking in with Portia and iCash around that as well in terms of referrals. And a big thing around that is the LARC education. So I think that will definitely be one of the key points in terms of conversation. So that will be monitored, and I think we're going to get registration data as well, Peter, in terms of which pharmacies have signed up for this. My personal opinion in terms of the expansion of the oral contraception and the blood pressure is that I don't think we'll see a massive rise in the number of cases being done currently at the minute. I do believe that pharmacies will focus on the pharmacy first element of this service to begin with. Now, as the service progresses post October 24, they will tie in the blood pressure and the oral contraception service into that £1,000 fixed monthly fee, and pharmacies will have to be providing all of the services, but at the beginning they don't need to do the oral contraception and blood pressure to get the pharmacy first payments. So I personally believe at the minute it will be a slow uptake for oral contraception and hypertension, which allows us to kind of consider the impacts and try and see if we can work some of that through. But obviously as the year progresses, we'll need to have a look at those other things in more detail, and we'll stay very close to yourself and Peter and iCash.
That's great. And if you forgive me just to come back quickly, so an opportunity to plug the great work that happens in our GP settings as well. So our LARC rates are some of the best in England, but the backbone of that provision is GPs. iCash is brilliant, but they're doing the significant sort of minority of that activity. And so again, if we think about the pathway, we need to ensure that as appropriate, people are signposted to their practices and the practices that are doing that work, because iCash would sink if we suddenly started sending significant activity there. Great.
It's more the referrals from the iCash into the pharmacy, but that's obviously that's a separate process. And then the Pathfinder sites are yet still to be confirmed, but once they are, we will be working with the local general practices in that area to work how we can best work with them in terms of the referrals and then the input back to them regarding the prescribing.
Lovely, thank you. Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Tony.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to come in on Hilary's point, and obviously it's absolutely right. We, you know, when pharmacies have new services, sometimes it can get passed back to GP practice, etc. I do think there's opportunity, as Sharon quite rightly said, pharmacies will be focusing on pharmacy first, and actually that's a massive opportunity to stop bouncing patients back to GP practice when we can treat them to the end point in community pharmacies. So that should be a really good opportunity. I'm not saying it's going to be a big bang on the 31st of January. I think, you know, pharmacies, as Sharon said, some of them will adopt it very quickly, and some will take some more time, etc. But given that actually the only sort of new funding coming into community pharmacy is via this route, there is a massive driver for pharmacies to take that up. So hopefully that should take some appointments off you, Hilary. And the other thing I would say is the hypertension service itself, now that they've actually made it so that pharmacists can freely use skill mix, but perhaps there is an opportunity now to actually move some of that routine monitoring from GP practice out into community pharmacy. So it's not just a one-way street of us sending GP practices things. These are actually being designed by NHS England to actually start sending some work back out. And I know that's very difficult when capacities mean that services can't be guaranteed. But as we move forward, we can talk to each other a bit better about preparedness and capacities and things like that, and actually use the services that are available to the public in a more seamless way, then I do think we can overcome some of those things, but it will require a lot of communication. I do accept that.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Okay, Sharon, thank you very much. You know, I know your report is for noting, so we're happy to do that, and it's really good to, you know, have this set out and to understand what's happening. And you know, I'm presuming you'll keep us in the loop as and when you feel that it's appropriate. But thank you.
Yeah, 100%. We'll monitor and evaluate it as we go through, and obviously the key engagement will be the communication between the stakeholders and ensuring that it's as seamless as it can be. So we'll work quite heavily, and I'm more than happy to bring it back to PCCC once we have some data and figures on terms of the start of the service.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, so that takes us into the operational delivery group reports. So I think the first one is the general practice one. Sadie, are you or Shepherd?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this. Thank you, Debbie. And then I'll hand over to Fiona for the dental report. So hopefully people have had a chance to read through the paper. As you can see, we talked about practices at risk, and I don't propose to talk any more about that, given that we spoke about it earlier on the risk register. In October, there was the monitoring of our e-declaration action plan, which members will have seen before. That's now being monitored as part of our TIA audit plan within the operational delivery group. And the deadline for submission for practices has actually been extended until this Friday, so that process is still ongoing. In terms of learning disability and severe mental illness health checks, I think it's fair to say that both of those areas are delivering slightly less than where we would like to be. There are a number of actions ongoing, and for learning disabilities in particular, Shepherd has agreed with the Executive Director of Nursing some sort of further capacity that we can commission. So that is being worked through at the moment, and we'll go back to the operational delivery group as part of the standard assurance there. So the resilience of general practice and the uptake of those health checks were the areas for escalation today. You can see that we've also approved the independent prescribing pathfinder programme that Sharon mentioned in her previous item, and the other approval that we did was an application from a practice to proceed with a project to convert from an owner-occupier model to a landlord-owned and leased model, which is a key part of resilience for many practices. This is becoming more and more common as we sort of move forward. So both meetings are quorate, and I don't think I have anything further to add unless there are any questions before we go to Fiona.
Okay, I think we're okay to go to Fiona then on the dental one. Thank you.
Thank you. So this report is an update from 2 meetings, and the committee will notice that the meeting scheduled for the 7th of September was actually cancelled. I think the highlights really to note are the fact that the workforce recruitment and retention plans were shared with the operational delivery group, and those are the ones that were approved by the primary care committee. And at the ODG meeting, there was an update on how successful these plans are actually and what progress is being made. And so ODG were very keen to highlight the very successful workforce plans for dentistry in this report to committee members. The delivery group also received a report on the impact of patient experience. This is the first of reports from the quality team, and I think if we reflect back on the conversation we've just been having around complaints and concerns that are being raised, it's going to be important to bring all this together and triangulate the information to understand where we may or may not have concerns. And the final thing I just wanted to really highlight is the risk. It's been highlighted at mid-year that many of our practices are forecast to underachieve their activity, and this is likely to be the picture at year end. and this is largely due to workforce recruitment and retention challenges. So it just highlights how important the work that the workforce team are doing to roll out initiatives to support this area, and how important that work is in helping to improve the resilience, the stability of our practices, and that in turn will help improve access. And then just to confirm that both meetings were quorate. I think that's all I'm going to say, unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Fiona. I mean, I'm glad to hear that the operational and delivery group felt the workforce plan was the right thing. That's really encouraging, isn't it? And suggests to me that there were some very good sort of practical things in there that have landed well. But just to so the issue of not achieving their contracted activity, that just to state the obvious, that's because if you haven't got enough people to be able to do it, you can't achieve what you set out to. So it will take time for those workforce initiatives to really bear fruit, which is why there's perhaps a disconnect there. And we know the enormous challenges in this area, really. Okay. Happy to note those then. Excellent. All right. Thank you very much. Really clear. So now we come to the Pharmaceutical Services Committee. Who am I?
I'm going to pick this one up. Shall I
Great.
start?
Yes, please. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we asked the committee to note the decisions made at the Pharmaceutical Services Regulations Committee meetings between July and September 2023. I will assume this paper has been read, and I'll just pick out some key points it contains. So the committee is hosted and chaired by NHS, Hertfordshire and West Essex ICB, working on behalf of the 6 ICBs in the east of England, and all ICBs are invited to attend. So for this quarter, there were no market entry applications for Norfolk, and there were no breach or remedial notices either issued for Norfolk. Market entry applications under appeal, we had 1 application granted on appeal. In terms of fitness decisions, 4 approved applications for new inclusions on the pharmaceutical list, and 1 not approved due to incomplete information. And there was also a change of superintendent approval. So next steps. Reporting will occur on a quarterly basis, and members and colleagues in ICBs are welcome to attend any future meetings should they wish to learn more about the regulatory processes that are followed.
Don't know that you're going to have a stampede, Catherine, but hey ho, you might. I might want to just listen in. I think it would be helpful to have that background actually. Okay, so but just to be absolutely clear, just and to use Chair's prerogative about sort of being sure I understanding what this is. So in other words, that we haven't had anybody who's applied really to become a pharmacist, open a pharmacist in Norfolk during this period that you're reporting. Market entry, that's what that means.
Yeah, and I thought really for the committee, if they wanted to know anything in terms of community pharmacy, it might be most useful to know that since April, when we took over, that we've had 7 community pharmacies close during that time. That was the one thing I thought it might be useful for people to just be aware of.
Yeah, yes. Okay, Peter.
Thanks. Catherine, obviously we've not met. It would just be helpful maybe to catch up outside of this meeting. Obviously we commission directly from pharmacy on the public health side of things, and again are clearly impacted by closures, not least where they're in some of our more rural or higher sort of disparity communities and things. So it would just be helpful to think how we might plug intelligence in and that type of thing. And there's a sidebar which again I'll pick up outside of here with you, which is I've inherited the model around our use of PGDs that were developing them entirely outside of any process that the ICB is using, and we can maybe just have a chat whether that continues to suit, or we want to think about bringing a bit of alignment there again on the premise that we're an ICS now. Thanks.
I mean, how does that 7 compare with other ICBs covered by this committee? Are we out of step, or is there a trend nationally?
I don't know, Sharon, are you able to?
Yeah, I think it's probably in line. So one of the big impacts is obviously the withdrawal of Lloyd's Pharmacy from the bricks and mortar market. So you may have seen last month that they have actually completely withdrawn from bricks and mortar. They're now just running, well, even their online operation, they have sold to Pharmacy to You. So they have left, in effect, the pharmacy market as we know it. So obviously we had 5 Lloyd's within Sainsbury's. So those were the big ones that we lost. But as I say, in a lot of other areas, the Lloyd's impact has been the big impact. For a lot of their smaller branches, they have been selling, and so we've had change of ownerships rather than closures. And obviously the committee are probably aware that Boots, and I can't remember at what point in this year, but they did announce that they were going to be closing 300 branches nationwide. And you know, 2 of the additional closures are Boots closures, and we possibly will be impacted further in the future as well. But nothing in we are not different from anybody else. It's a common picture across the.
Okay, that's helpful, Sharon. Thank you. Tony.
Yeah, just a bit of further context on that. I mean, nationally, there's just over 12,000 pharmacies, and we've lost over 2,000 in the last 2 or 3 years. We are going to carry on losing pharmacies, and it's not just pharmacy permanent closures. We've actually lost opening hours as pharmacies have reduced their hours back to absolute core contract. We have lost huge thousands and thousands of opening hours. So, you know, the fundamental core funding problem for community pharmacy remains. And the new sort of services, while helpful, don't actually address the core viability of community pharmacy and its dispensing functions, etc. So we are going to see continued closures, I'm afraid. Outside the period of Catherine's report, there are 2 distance selling pharmacies that are granted and due to open in or around Norwich. But over the last, well, since 2015, we have lost now nudging on 20 pharmacies from the community pharmacy structure in Norfolk and Waveney, and the vast majority of those have actually been in the last year. So I'm afraid we're seeing closures accelerate rather than anything else. But we've also seen a massive shift from multiple ownership to independent ownership as well, by about 20%. So the market has been incredibly volatile, and all that change has impacted on all of us and our partners, if you see what I mean. So, but I do sense a little bit more stability coming back in the short term, but I do think we're going to see some closures, which is going to make some very difficult decisions, because fundamentally you might want a pharmacy, but if it's not viable to open a pharmacy, then you know, that's very difficult. But it's something that the P&A group, the Pharmaceutical Needs Assessment Group, does consider. And actually, if you want detailed information about that, it publishes a supplementary statement, and there's one just been published which actually maps out the reductions in hours, the closures, and the granted openings, etc. So the P&A is the place to go and have a look for that.
Thank you, Tony. That's really helpful perspective. Sharon.
I think just for the committee to note as well is that we are working with the stakeholders around the areas where we know there are closures. So obviously there is an impact sometimes on the general practice, because customers will naturally just go back to the surgery and go, what do I do? So we're working quite closely with those stakeholders, also keeping them in contact with the key players within possibly a closure branch. But one of the things also as well is I work quite closely with the quality assurance pharmacist, Emma, within Karen's team, and we will offer quality support visits to pharmacies within the vicinity of those closures, so we can offer support around capacity, because obviously some of the pharmacies around that area may take on extra volume, and it's really discussing about their ability to take on that extra capacity as well. So we do have a plan of support in place in the areas that we know that there's going to be closures as well, to try and minimise the patient impact.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. Okay, thank you then. So again, really helpful discussion based on that report, so thank you. Okay, so now we come to the finance report. And is that, who am I? Is that
That's myself.
Oh, James, that's right. Hi, James.
Hiya. Thanks, Debbie. So as usual in the finance update, I'll treat the report as read, but just point out the key updates. So as we moved into month 7 of the 23-24 financial year, the ICB is currently forecasting an overspend of 800,000 across the prescribing, primary care and DOP areas for the full year. It's a slight worsening of 300,000 in forecast variance from month 6 to month 7. Moving on to the financial summary, where that total overspend is broken down, there's 5 key areas to point out. Firstly, the GP prescribing, which is currently showing £3.4 million overspent, of which 1.2 is due to underperforming efficiencies, and the balance is due to reduction in the ICB's largest rebate for edoxaban and pressures around SGLT2 and general drug inflation. Secondly, we have cost pressures around electricity costs for patients who require oxygen at home. This is contributing towards a £700,000 overspend for that factor. Within the delegated co-commissioning, there is now an underspend once the LCS offset has been factored in. This is due to additional recurrent allocation, which was awarded in month 6, which was agreed to pay down the historic underfunding within this area. There's also an amount of non-recurrent allocation which was received in month 6, which was used to reduce the overall overspend. And then lastly, dental is now showing an underspend due to contractual handbacks and underperformance adjustments at the moment. The next sections, the detailed variance analysis, are there to read through, but I'll just concentrate on the dental one. Section 6 breaks down the dental expenditure, and as you can see, that the overall forecast is 800,000 but unspent, which is explained by the anticipated underperformance and contract handbacks. However, this is still being affected by a reduction in patient revenue, which is valued at £6.7 million for the full year. Secondary and community dental continue to be on plan. As usual, on page 9, I've included the off-ledger reconciliation of the dental reserves that are available for reinvestment, and are still showing the affordability of the investments already agreed. And it gives an indication of the level of clawback which we may see in 23-24. This again will be updated each month.
You've gone on to mute,
James, you've muted yourself.
We've all gone on mute. I don't know what happened there.
My apologies. What bit?
Wasn't me.
Where did I get to when you last heard?
You just covered dental reserves. So.
Yeah.
Just I'll talk through the dental reserves again. Yeah. So as the dental reserve reconciliations there, just to show the affordability of the investments, and we'll continue to update that each month to show the overall picture of what's available for reinvestment. The next two sections, 7 and 8, are Optom Pharmacy. As at month 7, they are both showing on plan. However, there are some emerging issues that are driving overspends from month 8 onwards. So firstly, within Optom, we're starting to see some overspend against budget. The level of domestic visits appears to have increased and is creating an increase against budget there. And then in pharmacy, we're seeing the level of activity within the advanced services increase as well, particularly around the new medicine service, which have started to push up our forecast against budget for there. Finance teams will continue to monitor these areas and work closely with commissioners to understand and take any mitigating actions as required. Section 9 includes the update on the efficiency schemes up to month 7, which is showing £1.1 million underachievement on the planned efficiencies. The opioid and pod schemes being the 2 largest areas of slippage, which was the same as last month. Finally, the last section is just an update on the LCS activity we've received up to the point of this paper being written. This does highlight the areas where we've seen less activity than planned for mental health and SMI health checks, care homes, eating disorders and inclusion health. We need to continue to monitor these in year so we can understand any spikes in that activity. And that's all I was going to highlight.
Thanks, James. Lot of information in there. Questions or comments or reflections for James? Hi.
Thanks, Debbie. Yeah, thanks, James. I think it's always good to see a linkage between what's discussed in other agenda items and the finances. So I think your comments around Section 6 dental reserves are particularly striking, and they have been for a while. But what we heard before about not being able to meet the activity, you see back here in financial terms, and it's quite significant. In a similar vein, I just wanted to check on Section 7 optometry. So we heard earlier today about 300,000 eye tests, and I just want to make sure, are those covered by the first two line items in item 7, side tests and vouchers? Is that correct?
They are in terms of the ledger, but that's showing the month 7 position, but that is worsening as we're going into month 8, because obviously we're a month in arrears on what we're reporting here, but we have completed the month 8 finances, and they are showing some increases against budget in those areas now. So
yeah, okay, that's it. Thanks.
Right, thank you for that. Anything else, James? No. Okay, all right, thank you very much. So that takes us on then to the last item, which is the prescribing report, which again, I guess, makes a link towards the finance as well. So it's all linked, isn't it?
Indeed. Yes, thanks, Debbie. So last but not least, as usual, so this is cost and quality. It's not all about the cost, but medicines is the most common intervention to prescribe a medicine, most common intervention in the whole of the NHS. So an important part of the armoury of medicine. So I'll just go on with the figures. The first table, which I notice I haven't actually numbered, table 0 or X, therefore, benchmarks us across the 6 ICBs in the region. So just a sort of finger in the air to say how are we doing cost-wise, and we're third, as we have been for reasonably consistently. We're quite close to being 4th. This doesn't tell the whole picture. Doesn't factor in deprivation scores, as I always say. Also doesn't factor in rebates, and we the best value DOAC, edoxaban, as reprocured by NHS England, the pricing arrangement for that is that the money comes back to us via a rebate, and we are the highest prescribers of edoxaban in the country. So although, as James pointed out, we lost £1 million of that due to an argy-bargy between the Department of Health and NHS England on who was going to provide ICBs with either a rebate or clawback profits from the pharmaceutical industry. I'm afraid the Department of Health won that, and we lost effectively £1 million a year. I'll explain it to you if anybody wants. It's quite dull. If anybody wants me to offline, I won't do it here. Going on to table 1, looking at the cost pressures. If you look, go ahead at table 2, you can see price concessions appear to be at a more reasonable rate than they were in December, which was £1 million in the month. But if you go back to table 1, you'll note that NCSO or price concessions were at nearly 300,000 and 200,000 in November. But what the Department of Health do is put things back into the drug tariff at an increased price, so they don't appear on that second graph as a price concession. They just get effectively snuck back into the drug tariff at a higher price than they were previously before the price concession. At the moment, we are getting a benefit from Category M because this is the reimbursement to pharmacies through medicines margins, and it was overcooked by Department of Health, so now it's being clawed back, and we're getting a small benefit from that. But as you can see, our cost pressures to date on this report is 3.6 million, effectively just on drug pricing, taking off that benefit of Category M, so it's quite significant and does account for a lot of our overspend. National drug inflation is at 11% due to a lot of new drugs being used more and drug inflation. We're a little bit less than that, around about the 10% mark, so not doing too badly. Moving on to quality, finishing with cost. DFMs, dependence forming medicines, the 3, we're performing very similarly to previous, staying fairly stable. If you look at table 5, you'll see our big area of concern, which was anxiolytics and hypnotics, still continuing to come down faster than national, but still a long way to go on this one. This is a very slow piece of work to do. There's no quick way of doing it. So we keep encouraging practices to work on that through the prescribing quality scheme, etc. Antibiotic prescribing, there has been a national increase in antibiotics overall, and it'd be interesting to see what Pharmacy First does with this, because one of the outcomes, not the only outcome of Pharmacy First, is that patients might get an antibiotic, an appropriate antibiotic. The criteria is quite strict, so it won't be as many people as perhaps patients or GPs might expect. So it's likely that the volume of prescribing will go down overall, because it's likely because of the strict criteria that fewer patients will get antibiotics. That might cause antibiotic seekers to bounce around the system in their quest to obtain antibiotics. So we'll have to monitor that as we start the programme. Overall, if you look at table 6, we are just below the national threshold for broad spectrum antibiotics, and it did increase very slightly this month, but our volume of antibiotics is below the initial target, but it's above the last target. So it's overall volume is a concern. As I say, it has risen nationally, but that's an ongoing piece of work for my team and the quality team and the infection prevention and control team. At the moment, you can see, for instance, West Norfolk Coastal has the highest volume and prescribing of broad spectrum antibiotics. So there's a bit of work to do in those areas. We list the percentiles, so some practices appear quite high on this. Norwich Practices Health Centre is a walk-in centre, so you can effectively discount the data there, because that is largely driven by walk-in patients who probably justifiably their acute symptoms require that they need more antibiotics than other patients attending GP practices. We've listed the practices above the 10%. We've also, just for good measure, listed those below 10%, who have our congratulations on keeping a good tight grip on broad spectrum antibiotics, which are associated with increased risk of resistance and some things like C. diff, for instance, infection. There is a new target we've just put at the bottom here. NICE has changed the duration of antibiotic prescribing routinely on the common infections and common antibiotics from 7 days to 5 days. Still a little bit of work to do in some practices, but you'll notice from the graph below, Norfolk and Waveney has been improving over time. Still quite a long way to go, and it's 1 or 2 practices still almost exclusively using 7-day prescribing, who we are liaising with. So this will reduce the amount of the volume of antibiotics in the community. It won't help our other figures, which is purely driven by items, not quantity or volume, and percentage of broad spectrum. I'll stop there. Any questions, comments? Happy to take.
Anything from Michael? Karen.
Thank you. Just going to say this comment, really. Michael, it's really good reports. And I'm really pleased to hear you stressed the work that correlates with the infection prevention and control team in terms of prescribing with the rates of C. diff. Sorry, I've got a very irritating cat, if you saw that. So, you know, there is a concern. We're working very hard across the region in terms of reducing our C. diff rates. And it's about making sure we're not prescribing PPIs as well with it. So, yeah, it's a lethal combination, isn't it? Thank you.
Yes, so, yeah, PPIs do contribute to that, and even there are some other drugs associated with it. Diclofenac is in the frame as, by some strange mechanism, increasing the risk of C. diff infection.
Okay. All right. Well, as always, Michael, lots of detail in there, and maybe at some point it might be good to bring here and have a discussion more about actually, what and how we go about turning the curve on some of this stuff, and actually what we know works, what doesn't work, where the options are. That might be something to program in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And any other last questions or comments for Michael, or anything you wanted to say, Michael?
No, I don't think so. I think I've covered it in there. The pharmacy first, it's important that that goes well, and getting the messaging right, particularly around expectations of an antibiotic being prescribed at the end of it. It's very important that we work together to not raise expectations, that you'll go to the pharmacy for an assessment, and it's possible to get an antibiotic if the protocol says that you need one, or yeah.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Okay. So that takes us. We've done the risk. So that takes us to any other business. I'm not aware of any, and I'm not aware of any public questions. Just checking in with Sarah or someone about that.
Not received anything.
Okay.
To me, thanks.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. That's been we've got through a lot in there, and I think it's been really good to hear about the optometry and the pharmacy and linking those. I think that's been really informative. So thank you for those reports. So next meeting is seems a long way off in February, but we'll soon come round. So thank you very much, everybody, and see you all soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.